Let's bring in Kamala first. She's the vice president. What of this Kamala problem, which has really hit a head right now?
Well, she's more unpopular than he is. What she has going for her is she is the only one who can inherit all of the money. Her name is on the ticket. So all of the money that those two have raised, if he bows out, can go to her. If the Democratic nominee is anyone other than Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, that money is not usable. Now, my guess is they'll find attorneys that will say, oh, do this, 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 and this, and you're fine. But maybe it's legal, maybe it's not. Do you want that cloud hanging over you throughout the rest of the campaign? Probably not. So she's going to make the argument that if you decide to go with someone else, I'm your one and only shot. The problem that she has is she's also not up to the job. She's not up to the job for different reasons than him. But it's clear when you see her on television, when you see her interact on the global stage, when you see her interact with members of Congress, this woman is not prepared to lead the free world. She's not prepared to be president of the United States. Everyone knows that, including Joe Biden. If they believed that she were ready, he would not be running for re-election. He's running for re-election because he believes that she's a sure loser, and he's the only one who can win for the Democrats.
Are you suggesting that this person is not up to the job?
No, Taraji. Now, you know I wouldn't do that, especially not to a fellow bison. The real, ain't you? You know. So what's on?
You know.
I saw that. I haven't seen that since Hillary Clinton went in front of the black church where I don't know what their advisors tell them when they address a black audience, but
yeah.
The Amos and Andy drawl, I don't think is a winning combination.
That's from the BET Awards, all right? We played it yesterday, if everyone hasn't seen it yet. So it's at the BET Awards, and she's talking into a phone with some black woman, celebrity, whatever, and just like does blackface.
On your mind.
Oh, Madam VP Harris, I'm worried about the election. Women's reproductive rights are on the line. Our Supreme Court is on the line. Our basic freedoms are being tested, Madam VP. I know you've been traveling across the country. What are you hearing?
Yeah, girl, I'm out here in these streets. And
Okay, I'll give Taraji P. Henson a pass. If you're familiar with her as an actress, okay, she talks like that. Kamala Harris is Indian and Jamaican, and she's not from Jamaica. Her family is from Jamaica. She does not talk like that. She's a California girl who then grew up in Canada.
That's so good. All right, what's the worst thing about Kamala Harris?
The worst thing about Kamala Harris is the laugh. I think the laugh is like nails on a chalkboard for people. And I know that people say, oh, men are so hard on her because of the laugh and the cackle and all that. Hillary Clinton made the same claims. I think the opposite is true. I think that drives other women crazy. I think that the cackle does not win her many fans with the ladies.
Why? Tell us about her like California background.
Okay,
and why she's unqualified because of that.
So there's a political machine in San Francisco that pretty much decides who gets what office. And there was a guy who used to run it by the name of Phil Burton, who would have been the Speaker of the House. There would have never been Nancy Pelosi or any of the others had Phil Burton lived. He died of a heart attack as a very young man. And then Willie Brown kind of took over the political machine, and others, Nancy Pelosi. And she came from that world. She was Willie's girlfriend, and Willie greased the skids for her so that she could become the DA, she could become the Attorney General, she could become the U.S. Senator. And he's a very powerful guy who's very politically savvy, who knows how to do the right things. Now, that being said, when she was in elected office, when she was Attorney General of California, you run the California Department of Justice. You run the California version of the DOJ at the federal level. And she was an awful manager. Oh, my God, was she an awful manager. I have listeners who used to work for her because there's a lot of people who aren't political appointees who work for that office. They're career bureaucrats, and many of them are Republicans or independents or conservative Democrats who listen to my radio show. and the stories that they would tell of her being an awful manager. She doesn't know how to run anything. She can go into a legislature and vote a partisan line, which is easy to do if you're in the majority, or even easier if you're in the minority, because you don't have to be responsible for any legislation. You just vote no across the board. But when she was actually in a position where she had to run an office, that office was a complete disaster. There are stories in some of the newspapers here chronicling, some of her problems. But she experienced the same issues when she was a candidate for the presidency. Her campaign was a complete train wreck. It was a mess. And that was one of the reasons she couldn't win any of those early primary states, including early voting states with large black populations. Joe Biden is the nominee because he cleaned everyone's clock in South Carolina, in part because the black voters got behind him. They didn't get behind Kamala. And if you recall, even in the early days as being vice president, it was story after story after story about the chaos that her office is in. And you think about the low stakes of being vice president, of, going on these diplomatic missions and those sorts of things. She couldn't do that. If you can't do those things, and the one important thing that they gave her was the border, and that blew up in her face like a hillbilly's rifle.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, name one thing that she's done that's worked. I can't.
No. We're talking to John Phillips, host of the John Phillips Show, KABC in LA, KSFO in San Francisco. So she'll never be closer to the presidency than right now. Like these next month, like this is her go at it. Does she have the wherewithal, the wits, the machine to play her cards right now and get this slot before the election?
This is her one chance of being president. If Joe rolls a 7, she's the president, and there's nothing anyone can do about that.
Yep.
If Joe decides to resign, I believe she's the only option they have. I am not buying into this. It's going to be Gavin. It's going to be Gretchen Whitmer. It's going to be the governor of Kentucky. Just if you look at the procedure, if you look at the rules, that is very, very, very difficult to do without incurring all kinds of penalties if you're the Democrats. And I don't even think it's really legally possible. I think you could block that in court in any number of ways. So her one shot is now. So if there's any time in her career where she has to play her cards right, it's right now. In an open field where she would just be a candidate running against all of these other people, I don't believe she would be the nominee. Even though the Democratic Party, the machinery, many of them would feel obligated to get behind her, if Joe loses and she runs in 2028, they're going to want a winner, and she's not that.
No, definitely not. Okay, does Gavin want to run against Donald Trump?
Oh, of course.
Now.
Of course. He looks in the mirror every morning and sees the president. He doesn't care who he runs against. He just wants to be in the White House. He is totally checked out as governor of California. We have an absentee landlord governor. He is not engaged at all with the state legislature. He's not engaged at all in any state issues. He's dealing with federal issues. He's talking about abortion. He's talking about what's going on in Texas and Florida and Alabama and Mississippi. He's a surrogate for the Biden campaign. He was at that debate on all the cable news shows.
He was the only Democrat I saw who immediately came out and said, Joe's our guy. We're not bailing on him. We don't stab people in the back. He's the only one who stuck with the party line instantly and has not left it.
And that's a strategic decision for him. He believes that will produce the most dividends in the long term because he's not a loyal guy. He's perfectly willing to push anyone under a bus if it suits his needs. So, he thinks that Biden is going to be the guy, and loyalty to Biden and doing everything you can to get Biden elected is going to be what Democrats are going to reward 4 years from now. But in his heart of hearts, I can tell you, he's singing a different tune to people in private. He's politically savvy enough to recognize what kind of trouble Joe Biden is in. I mean, he doesn't suffer fools in that regard. But if you believe that Democrats are going to reward the partisan soldier 4 years from now, or the loyal soldier, then that's the way to play your hand.
Can he make a go at it now?
No. I really firmly am of the belief the Democratic nominee is almost certainly going to be Joe Biden. And if it's not Joe Biden, it's going to be Kamala Harris. When they changed their convention rules in '68, those delegates, which belong to Joe, are legally required to vote for him on at least the first or second ballot, or both of those ballots, maybe even more than that. And he has the delegates. So I don't see how anyone can take it away from him legally unless Joe decides he's going to stand down. If Joe comes out and says, I am too mentally incapacitated to be a candidate for office, then you're also too incapacitated to be president. How can you make the argument, I'm not up to give a convention speech, but I'm up to have the nuclear football? I don't see how you can intellectually make that argument. And the minute he does that, she becomes president, she becomes the incumbent, and then all of the money that they've raised, which is a substantial amount, gets cleanly transferred to her. If it's not her, you cannot cleanly transfer that money. Now, you can try to get creative and put it in independent accounts and, we're not going to coordinate with him over here or her over there.
Yeah.
But, you're really on thin ice if you're trying to play those games. Because the minute you slip up, then suddenly you have all kinds of campaign finance violations at an extremely critical time in the election. Who wants to deal with that headache?
What is the relationship between Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris?
Frenemies. They come from the same machine in San Francisco. Willie Brown appointed him initially to the parking board and then appointed him to the board of supervisors. She was backed by Willie Brown when she ran for district attorney in San Francisco, and then for all of her subsequent higher offices. Their careers started around the same time. They would go to all the same events, all the same fundraisers. They have the same benefactors. So they're very familiar with one another, and they've made a point to run for offices where they don't bump heads against one another. Yes. They've never run against each other for mayor or Congress or governor. And they've worked out...
They're about to bump heads.
Yeah, they've worked out these deals in private beforehand. So they knew, for example, when that Senate seat opened up, that was Kamala's, but then Gavin had the governorship.